Tomas Zidek, I'm back. For more content, check out my website tomaszidek.com.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Bang!
Welcome everyone to the podcast. Today I have a special guest, Patrick Lehrbach, self-employed external consultant specializing in the area of Agile and Agile at scale, and my good friend. Patrick, welcome here.
Thanks for having me here, and welcome all you out there listening to us. So I'm very happy to be here, and I hope we have a good conversation.
And what is our topic today, Patrick?
So I thought we might talk about stances as a Agile coach or Scrum Master. So what are different stances that one fills in when we work with teams or also management?
And what do you expect this would bring to the audience talking about the different stances?
Maybe it's mostly the experience sharing part that might be interesting for listeners. So for me, it was like, I found out that there are different stances that might be very important when I'm working as a Scrum Master or Agile Coach. And in the beginning, I mostly worked with, let's say, training style and doing more the teaching and also giving a lot of advice how teams should work or act or be in an agile environment. And then I found out that also maybe if teams get more experienced, there might be other stances that can be very important for teams and also for the different roles like Scrum Master and a product owner. That might more fit then to a specific stage they are in.
And if the audience would understand that there are different stances, what do you think would be the benefit?
I think a benefit could be then a balanced view on using or being first aware that there are certain stances. And for me, it was like a self-awareness then. Oh, I have several stances as a choice, and I can really upfront decide which stance might fit best for certain situations. And I think that could be one benefit, to be aware that there are different stances and that they can be used in different circumstances.
And what do you think we should mention today in this conversation so that people are aware of these different stances and they can decide which one might fit for different circumstances?
Again, the question was too long for me.
Okay, short version. What do you think we need to achieve here today so that it fits the purpose for the people, so they are aware?
So, as I said, I mean the awareness part. I think that would be very good if we can if we can make people aware that there are a lot of stances available, not just, for example, the teaching one, that you can also do some mentoring with a Scrum Master, for example, that you also can do coaching, and then also explain what would be those stances all about. I think that could also be a good achievement for the end of this session, and also maybe to give one or two examples that might be as experiments might be tried out.
So giving some experiments and explaining what are those different stances about. So what are all the stances that are on your mind, Patrick?
And here I'm hoping for some co-creation, Thomas. I know it's also your topic, and you are also a good specialist for that. And I think some of the stances we discussed also when we worked together in the past already. And for me, so I'm sharing my experience first, and maybe then you can just add in and see where we come, to which point we will go. So first, for me, the first thing I really did a lot was the teaching stance. So teaching is really when I get some requests from a team that they do not know certain things, and they request teaching for topics that are new for them. So for example, if you have a very unexperienced Scrum team, and then I was asked to offer a first training so that they would be able to understand basic concepts of Scrum and principles also of and values of Agile working. So there was a clear request in that case for the stance teaching. And what I did then was I delivered a training. So I was purely in the teaching stance.
And yes, I'm co-creating, Patrick. And
That's fine.
and you said training. So for you, what is the difference between teaching and training?
Wow. So for me, a training or a teaching is quite similar. So I would say when I'm acting in the teaching stance, then I'm doing a short-term telling of knowledge I have and share this knowledge. And also I try out, maybe then comes the difference to training. So I also when I teach, I provide the knowledge, and when I train, then I let also the people exercise it and provide some room for exercises and also for their own thoughts and reflections on what they got taught.
Mm. And what I found interesting is that you mentioned that you had a clear request from the team.
Mhm.
So how is this important for the teaching stance?
Well, okay, there is two aspects. I mean, if you know what you don't know, you can ask for it. Some teams don't know what they don't know. So for me, for example, it was when I encountered coaching as a topic, professional coaching. So when I don't know what I'm not knowing, then I can't ask for it. Yeah, well, that's simple. And then it's so new that I even don't know what should I ask for, because I just simply don't know, for example, the power of coaching. But if I know that coaching has some power, but I don't know how to use it, what it's really meaning, and so on, then I can ask for it. Then I can ask you, well, give me some first insights. What is coaching all about? And then I'm asking for some teaching, maybe just some sentences. What is this all about?
And it's very interesting for me, because when you say to request a training, you have to know what you don't know, because you cannot request a training about something that you do not know. What to do when the team doesn't know that they don't know, so there is no request for the training?
Yeah, well, then usually when I'm hired as an external, they have some kind of request. Maybe they tell me, things are not going well here. We struggle with our daily work, but we don't know really what's the issue, or maybe they know, but it has nothing to do with Agile. So then we are in the pre-stage. So I'm not coming and will teach about Scrum or Agile. So I'm trying to find out, okay, what is going on, and why do they probably need someone supporting them.
Well, for me, to share my thoughts a little bit, it's often that people say that the team doesn't know that they do not know, or that the team is not aware that they have a so-called problem. But someone had to call us in, so there has to be some request. If there was no request, then the external consultant would not be in the company, and the internal position would not have been created. So there must have been someone who had an idea that something should be changed, or at least that some conversation should happen. And for me, the key is to find this person, to talk to this person. And sometimes that is very difficult because it might be someone from higher levels of management. But for me, this is the most reasonable approach, because when you think about working with the people that do not know that they do not know, and do not have any request for teaching, and you go there and you start teaching them, then I'm not even sure if it qualifies for teaching. It might be just annoying, which should not be a stance of a Scrum Master nor the Agile Coach. So for me, the request is the key somehow.
Yeah, and I would agree there. And especially in this situation, maybe also adding in now, building on what you said, if we have a team that doesn't know what they don't know, then you wouldn't just simply teach them anything. So you would probably ask questions. And what would that be? What would that be for a stance for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, if you would ask questions, Patrick, I'm a simple person. So I just differentiate between 4 main things, as you might have heard me in the past talking about them: consulting, training, coaching, and mentoring. And we already somehow concluded that if there is no request, then you cannot teach, you cannot train anyone, because there are no attendees. So if there is an empty room, well, you might try and you might be the first one, but there's probably not going to be much benefit if you do a training in an empty room. So what to do if there is no request? And you said that you would ask questions. And asking questions for me does not necessarily mean coaching. I think it can mean coaching or consulting. And at this point, you would have to probably, as I'm thinking about it, make a decision. And it's hard to talk in general. So I think the best advice is see the context. It always depends on the context. But for example, if there is a team that doesn't have a specific request for training, but at least wants to have a conversation with you, so there is obvious need or obvious enthusiasm to have a conversation with you, then I would say, well, I would take the coaching stance. So I would ask open-ended questions, and I would try to understand what is their hope, what do they want to achieve. If I compare it to the consulting stance, which is, in my perspective, a problem-focused approach, usually consisting of defining what is the problem and what is the root cause and proposing a solution, then I think I would go into this stance if there is no other option. So if it's not possible to, as you said, co-create the solution with the team. And this context would be, for example, if the management is making these requests and the team is not interested at all. So if you have just the management pulling for the service, and the service should be done not with the management but with the team, more or less, I would even say on the team, then I think your only option is consulting, because you can kind of have some conversations with the team members and specify the problem and then describe it to some stakeholders and make them decide.
Yeah, sounds very reasonable for me. So I can also give my perspective on that, and I think it's not different at all. So I think you really explained very good which differences asking questions would make for a consulting or a coaching stance. And yeah, I just can give my perspective on it. So I see myself as a sparring partner in these kind of situations. And the definition of sparring is, yeah, it's written usually as it naturally varies with the nature of the skills that is intended to be developed. So I would ask for which skill would you like to develop? So I'm here more with open-ended questions maybe in that context. And when I find out which skills they would like to develop, then probably I can see which stance would fit best. And then I'm at a stage where they probably would know what they don't know.
And if they say that they do not want to develop any skill, that they already have everything they need, then what would you do?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So if we come to a point, so it was now a very simplistic shortcut version of my perspective I tried to bring in. So I would ask more than one question. But it's for me it was bottom lining. So the bottom line would be which can I find out things we would like to develop. So I compare again to the sparring situation. So if you are in a sport environment and you would like to you visit a gym and you ask someone to be your sparring partner. So let's say I'm the external consultant and you hired me and you ask me to do some sparring. So then naturally, when it is in the sports environment, I would join you and I would ask you, yeah, well, what would you like to work with me on? So what is it that we should train, or what would you like to achieve? So these kinds of questions you would ask if you start a sparring session, and then naturally you would start exercise and then see how it goes, and then see also what is the benefits and which changes we would need to do in our sparring sessions while we go.
And just imagine that you ask me, what skill would you like to develop? And I have a particular skill in mind that I would like to develop: making project plans. So,
well, that would be maybe a bit like I'm comparing now again to the sports metaphor I had. So you come to the gym and tell me, well, I'm here, I would like to sing songs. So
yeah,
let me ask back, if you go to a gym and you know I'm a boxing trainer or a coach for boxing and for martial arts, for example, would you ask me to train that I train you with singing songs?
Yeah, that sounds like not a best idea. What I'm trying to say is that, when you read Scrum Guide, when you read books about Agile, it usually describes the state of things when everything is working and everyone wants to do Agile. While when you're working as an Agile coach, one of the biggest challenges is that sometimes not everyone wants to do Scrum, for example. So what do you think an Agile coach should do in these situations?
Well, I think a bit about the problem I always try to find out. So if I have a situation, for example, that parts of the team, or there's teams that refuse to go in to investigate or to spend more thoughts towards Scrum, and they block it completely, then of course I will also will need to understand why they are blocking it. And it's also dependent on my agenda. So if I have an agenda as an external coach being hired to work with teams that they know more about Scrum, then I have an agenda, and then I would also try to find out what is blocking them, and then work on the reasons that I find out. So, for example, what I often found out in situations like that was that there have been other consultants before, that they have been trained in some way they should work with Scrum, and then they are being left alone, for example. And in that example, I'm referring to when they are being left alone, so they fall back in old structures, and they mixed the Scrum vocabulary with practices they already knew from the past, and they created something new, and then they were somewhere between the worlds, I would say, and they found out it didn't work for them. So they decided that it is probably Scrum that isn't working for them, and for that reason they blocked in that example. So I needed to find out in this example what it was all about. So why are they blocking? And then once I found out about this problem, then I could start to ask some questions and also go into a more future solution designing approach to maybe create something new. Maybe it's not called Scrum then in that example, because the word Scrum was burned already in that example. So we called it something else. But we worked with the Agile values and principles and just checked if those would help them or not. I mean, and that was then co-creation. So we just I brought in some basic knowledge about what the Scrum values and principles would be all about, and they checked for themselves if those principles could help them to create a working environment that might be a good one for them.
And you mentioned a couple of times coaching as one of the stances.
Mm-hmm.
So where do you see what is the role of coaching in the Agile coaching activity?
It is the stance I fell in love the most when I was trained, how it really works. But unfortunately, in the most of my engagements, I can't do professional coaching a lot, and I'm just saying professional coaching because then there is a difference to agile coaching in wording already. because agile coaching for me is like the umbrella for all those stances we just talked about, and the professional coaching would be one stance. And this stance I couldn't use a lot in the agile coaching under the agile coaching umbrella, purely with sometimes when I worked with Scrum Masters or product owners, I came to a point where I offered coaching conversations. But as a coaching conversation or a coaching session needs to be free of agenda from my side, so I can't be a coach with an agenda in a coaching conversation. And usually, when I get hired by companies to consult or to work with the teams, I have an agenda already for those teams I'm working with, and then I can't be free of this agenda when coaching. But when I do the coaching, then I create a room, so I'm transparent about this. I'm saying, well, I'm here, I'm hired by you, but nevertheless, we can have a coaching conversation about this or that topic if you like, and I'm just offering it. And sometimes it helped. So not a lot of times the people really used the opportunity to do a coaching conversation with me, but when they did, then I usually received a good feedback for the approach or the stance I was in there.
And then what do you think is the benefit of this stance?
Well, of course, when you talk about professional coaching, so I don't have an agenda. I followed the agenda of my coachee, and I provide some room for improvement. So usually, what I find out when I do the coaching conversation with coachees, that in the beginning they are tied to their problem a lot. But as a coach, I'm not interested a lot in their problem. I'm not asking questions that are problem oriented. I'm more interested in the person and what the person thinks about it, what makes the person feel, what is the problem to them in the moment, what would they like to be in the future. And by asking this kind of questions, also not just about a solution, also about the person itself and how they are in this environment they describe at the moment, and what is blocking them, and what is holding them back, and what makes them feel, how they express they feel. Sometimes it just helps to reflect what you can see when they offer some emotions, because they can't see themselves usually when they talk to you. They begin to create solutions by themselves, and I'm just asking questions and providing maybe intuitions or giving my intuitions and reflecting, mirroring what kind of emotions I can see.
And it's no surprise that I also love coaching, and we exchange on the topic a lot in the past. What I see as a benefit of coaching, and you briefly described it by saying that they create solutions by themselves. For me, the biggest benefit of coaching is that people get pulled into the conversation. So there is no predefined package for them that they should consume, no standard solution. They get pulled into the creation process, and they create tailor-made solutions for their context and their situation. So it's not one size fits all, but it's the specific solution for the specific person, for the specific context. And that's, for me, the biggest advantage. And also, just to mention, people are usually willing to follow their solutions and their ideas much easily than something that comes from outside. So whenever you tell someone you should do this and this, usually the reaction of the other person is that, well, please stop annoying me. And that can happen when you take the teaching or consulting stance, that the people, they just do not welcome your ideas. But by asking open-ended questions and listening attentively to the client, you can find out that maybe even the solution is already in place and we just need to talk about it more to build on it.
Yeah.
And Patrick, you said, yeah, please.
I wanted to shoot a question at my co-creating friend Thomas.
Yeah, please do
So
it.
I think we mentioned now just bottom lining three stances. And we mentioned the teaching, we mentioned the consulting, we mentioned the coaching a lot, but we forgot until now about the mentoring. So what is the
Well,
mentoring all about for you?
well, the mentoring definitely is more about telling than asking questions for me. So I use a simple way to distinguish between stances and how much are they about telling and how much they are about asking questions. So usually um, consulting requires some part of asking, but then it's somehow expected that you will tell. So I think people would be kind of surprised if there would be a consultant just asking questions, what is the problem? Then they would express their thoughts about what the problem is, and then the consultant would just not do anything or not say anything. That might sound like a strange consultant. Um, then there was the training, which of course there might be some questions, but basically training is about telling. So there is already predefined content. You cannot change much the content. If you're doing a Scrum training and someone comes in and wants to get a training on time management, for example, it's simply not possible because training has an agenda. So training is also more about telling. Then you have coaching, which is the complete opposite, consists of asking questions and telling really in a very, very specific occasions, which I do not want to talk about in this podcast, but we might do that in another episode. And the last one, as you said, mentoring. And mentoring for me needs telling, because the idea of mentoring is that you have a mentor and a mentee, and the mentor has to be someone who is more experienced or more knowledgeable about a certain topic and shares the experience with the mentee. So for me, the key with mentoring is to select a proper area and get mentored in the area. And usually mentoring happens around a role, but you can say that it's around a topic because the role is always related to a topic. And this is for me one of the main things that you have to focus on when you want to select a mentor is, do you have a clear idea about the topic area you want to get mentored in? Because if you know what you want to get mentored in, then this can be a very fruitful relationship, really relationship that when I have experienced mentoring in the past, I really benefited a lot from it. But what is not a good idea, just to share some negative examples, is, and I'll share my experience from the past. So I was having a coaching relationship with a client, and the client more or less said that she doesn't know, which is can happen. We do not know everything. Sometimes we have to just think and create something. So she said that she doesn't know, and she asked if I could mentor her, became her mentor. And I said, what is the area that you would like to get mentored in? And she said, same as coaching. And I said, well, to me, we are not restricted right now. Up to this point, we are not restricted to a certain area. So we talk about life in general. And she said, yeah, let's do it. And I said, well, and what is it that you would like to get mentored in? And she said, just in life, just tell me what I should do. And I said, well, then I cannot accept, because I'm not an expert in life. And I would never have the courage, or I would even say the arrogance, to tell you what you should do in your life. And that's how it ended, this mentoring request.
That's a very interesting story. How could it possibly go wrong?
Yeah.
Well, when I and that would be a perfect how do you say, a perfect starting point for a coaching conversation, because she is expert for her life, or he, the person you talk to, and usually that would be a good starting point for a coaching session. But maybe not for a mentoring session. Yeah, and for the mentoring, I would also just as because we just suggested in the beginning, also giving some experiments or some things that might listeners can try out themselves. So mentoring is a stance I really use a lot in the Agile coaching, under the Agile coaching umbrella. Usually mentoring works good with Scrum Masters that are not, or that are less experienced than myself. So then the parameters we just talked about are set, because I'm then obviously more experienced or more expert in that Scrum Master Agile coaching area. And therefore I can mentor the less experienced Scrum Master that is seeking for a mentorship. And for me also sometimes works good in the product owner environment, because I worked a lot in this area as well years ago. I personally, so whenever you are more expert than the person that then would be your mentee, you can use this stance. And as an Agile coach, usually it can work for Scrum Masters and for product owners.
And what are the experiments at the end that you would like to give to the audience?
So one experiment could be about the mentoring we just talked about. So whenever you are in a position where you have the feeling while Agile coaching or being the Scrum Master that a mentorship could be helpful, because a mentorship would also be a bit more long running relationship than probably just some teaching or training session. You could try to offer it and work from that stance, or at least dig into that stance and see if it might benefit you for upcoming situations. That would be one experiment. Find out about the mentoring stance and try to use it.
An experiment from my side, because I got inspired by your experiment. So you see, it's a co-creation. We cannot avoid it. We're all in this together. Experiment from my side. The next time someone asks you for advice, try to understand what difference would this advice, if it was given, brought to the client. Client meaning the other side. The question might be why to ask such a weird question, why just not give the advice? And the thing is, the tricky part with trainings and advices in general is that sometimes I feel it's like watching Netflix, consuming stuff that a lot of people, they just ask for trainings, ask for advice, they see nice PowerPoints, nice training, they hear something nice, and then nothing happens. And we as coaches, and doesn't matter if it's professional coaching or agile coaching, what we should always seek is change, a real change, not just consumption of information, because again, that's like watching Netflix. So by asking what difference should this advice make, you're already creating something which is called contract. And again, we might speak in a different episode. So you're trying to understand what the difference would the advice make in the client's life. Just try to ask these questions and you might observe something miraculous. And my experience with this is that as I love coaching and I like to stay in the coaching stance as strongly as possible, many times people have asked me to give advice and I ask, so what difference would this advice make to you? And they started talking and at the end we had a coaching session. And the client didn't even notice that I didn't share any advice. So the client came up with her advice. And it made me think a little bit once. And I came to a conclusion that when people ask advice, who says that the advice has to come from the outside? So you want advice? Let me ask you a couple of questions so you can give yourself advice. That's the coaching stance and how we should think about clients and their own wisdom.
Very cool. So now you got 2 experiments to try out. And one stance we forgot about to talk, maybe that's also then a follow-up or a next session that can be planned. The facilitation stance, also very important stance for the Agile Coach. So when you're not talking about the content at all, so you are just building a structure or giving a structure and guiding through. We can go more in depth there, probably in a next time.
It's a teaser, Patrick. That's a teaser.
Yeah, well, just adding in.
So that's the extra stance that you take, a salesman.
Call us. If you want to find about the facilitation stance. Thanks, Thomas.
Thank you,
this
Patrick.
Opportunity. It was really a pleasure being here.
Thank you, Patrick, and see you next time.
Thank you. See you next time.
Have you enjoyed today's show the same way I did? Then hit the subscribe!